The Veil of Lethargy, unmasking sleepy spirits and their influence on divine principle students. The pursuit of spiritual truth is often depicted as a radiant path, illuminated by divine revelation and propelled by an unquenchable thirst for knowledge. For students of the divine principle, the profound theological system at the heart of the unification movement, this journey promises not just intellectual enlightenment but radical personal transformation and a deeper connection to God's heart. Yet, a subtle, pervasive, and often perplexing phenomenon frequently clouds this path. An inexplicable, overwhelming drowsiness that descends precisely when the mind and spirit need to be most alert. This is not merely physical fatigue. It is a spiritual malaise, known informally among many students and practitioners as the influence of sleepy spirits. While often discussed in hushed tones or with a knowing chuckle, the impact of these unseen forces on an individual's study, spiritual growth, and overall commitment to the divine principle can be profound, undermining zeal, fostering apathy, and creating a formidable barrier to the very truth they seek. This extensive article aims to pull back the veil on this often misunderstood phenomenon. We will delve into the nature of these sleepy spirits, their origins, motivations, and the multifaceted ways they manifest. More importantly, we will explore the theological framework within the divine principle that helps us understand the spiritual warfare and, critically, offer comprehensive, practical strategies for students to recognize, resist, and ultimately overcome this insidious influence, transforming a potential stumbling block into a stepping stone for deeper spiritual awakening. Introduction: the peculiar battleground of revelation. Imagine a classroom, a quiet study nook, or a lecture hall where the divine principle is being expounded. The content is rich, the lecturer passionate, the implications revolutionary. Yet, across the room, heads begin to nod. Eyes glaze over. A profound, almost irresistible urge to sleep washes over individuals, irrespective of how well-rested they were moments before. This experience is remarkably common among those engaging deeply with the divine principle. It's often dismissed as simple fatigue, lack of interest, or even the complexity of the material itself. But for many, there's a nagging suspicion that something more profound, and indeed spiritual, is at play. The divine principle is not merely a philosophical treatise. It is a revealed truth, a blueprint for God's will and humanity's destiny. It challenges existing paradigms, exposes the roots of human suffering, and offers a radical path to peace and restoration. Such truth, by its very nature, is threatening to forces that thrive on ignorance, division, and spiritual inertia. The spiritual world, as taught by the divine principle, is dynamic and interactive, constantly influencing the physical world, often in ways imperceptible to our physical senses. Therefore, the act of studying the divine principle becomes implicitly an act of spiritual warfare. It is an attempt to illuminate darkness, to dismantle the structures of the fallen world, and to awaken dormant spiritual senses. It is precisely at this nexus of spiritual profoundness and transformative power that the sleepy spirits often make their most concerted efforts. They are not merely an annoyance. They are a calculated strategy by the spiritual world of evil to impede God's providence and prevent individuals from grasping the truth that can set them free. Our exploration will therefore move beyond anecdotal observations to a deeper, more structured understanding, anchored in the spiritual realities unveiled by the divine principle itself. Part 1. The divine principle as a spiritual battleground. To comprehend the phenomenon of sleepy spirits, one must first appreciate the unique nature and immense significance of the divine principle within God's providence. It is far more than a textbook. It is a spiritual key. The transformative power of the divine principle. The divine principle outlines God's ideal of creation, the origin of the human fall, the course of history as God's providence of restoration, and the ultimate goal of establishing a world of peace and righteousness. Its study is not merely academic. It is designed to do the following things. 1. To illuminate truth. It answers fundamental questions about life, death, God, and our purpose, cutting through millennia of confusion and distorted understanding. 2. To awaken conscience. It appeals to the deepest parts of our being, revealing our fallen nature but also our divine potential. 3. To restore original nature. By understanding the ideal and the fall, individuals are empowered to overcome their fallen nature and cultivate characteristics aligned with God's original blueprint. 4. To connect to God's heart. It reveals God's suffering, consistent love, and ultimate victory, fostering empathy and a deep desire to participate in His providence. 5. To empower action. Knowledge of the divine principle is meant to inspire action, leading to personal and communal transformation, ultimately contributing to world peace. This comprehensive, holistic, and ultimately revolutionary understanding makes the divine principle a formidable spiritual weapon against the forces of darkness, the spiritual world of evil and its opposition. Within the framework of the divine principle, the fall of humanity introduced not only sin into the physical world but also established a spiritual world of evil, often associated with Satan and his subordinate spirits. This realm actively opposes God's providence. Its primary agenda is to keep humanity ignorant of God's truth, alienated from His love, and bound by self-centered desires. When a new profound truth like the divine principle is revealed, it represents a direct threat to the dominion of these evil forces. It is analogous to turning on a powerful light in a dark room where malevolent entities have long hidden and operated with impunity. The light exposes them, diminishes their power, and provides a pathway for those trapped in darkness to escape. Therefore, it is logical to assume that the spiritual world of evil would actively seek to hinder the dissemination and absorption of the divine principle. Their strategies are manifold. Direct temptation, encouraging immoral behavior separating individuals from God. Misinformation and doubt, distorting truth, spreading rumors, fostering skepticism. Division and conflict, instigating strife within communities and families. Apathy and lethargy, draining energy, creating indifference, and inducing mental fog, which brings us directly to the sleepy spirits. The phenomenon of sleepy spirits is thus understood as one of the subtle, yet highly effective tactics employed by the spiritual world of evil to prevent individuals from fully grasping and embodying the transformative truths of the divine principle. Defining sleepy spirits: nature, origins, and motivations. The term sleepy spirits is a colloquial and somewhat simplistic label for a more complex spiritual influence. While not explicitly detailed in the core texts of the divine principle, the concept aligns perfectly with its teachings on the spiritual world and spiritual warfare. The nature of sleepy spirits. These are generally understood to be low-level, opportunistic spirits from the spiritual world of evil. They are not typically high-ranking demonic entities with grand strategic plans, but rather a pervasive spiritual static or fog that infiltrates the spiritual atmosphere. Energetic drain. They seem to operate by draining spiritual and mental energy, creating a sensation of fatigue even when one is physically rested. Mental clouding. Their influence manifests as a dulling of the intellect, making it difficult to concentrate, comprehend complex ideas, or retain information. Emotional apathy. Beyond drowsiness, they can induce a feeling of indifference, boredom, or even subtle resentment towards the material being studied. Opportunistic. They prey on moments of vulnerability, physical tiredness, emotional stress, spiritual doubt, or even just the inherent difficulty of engaging with profound truth. It's important to distinguish them from merely feeling tired after a long day or struggling with complex material. The hallmark of sleepy spirits is the sudden, overwhelming, and often context-specific onset of drowsiness, particularly when engaging with spiritually potent content. Origins and hierarchy within the spiritual world of evil. According to the divine principle, the spiritual world is vast and hierarchically structured, reflecting both good spirits, angels, ancestor spirits in the good spiritual world, and evil spirits, demonic spirits, ancestor spirits in the spiritual world of evil. Sleepy spirits likely originate from the lower echelons of the spiritual world of evil. Unredeemed ancestors. Spirits of individuals who lived in ignorance, apathy, or self-centeredness, and who remain stuck in lower spiritual realms. Their very existence is characterized by a lack of light and energy, and they may unconsciously or consciously seek to perpetrate similar states in the living. Demonic subordinates. Lower-grade spirits who serve higher-ranking evil entities. Their job is to create spiritual obstacles, and inducing lethargy is an effective one. Residual spiritual stagnation. The accumulated spiritual negativity from millennia of fallen history can create an ambient spiritual atmosphere of heaviness and inertia, which these spirits exacerbate. They are not necessarily intelligent in a human sense, but act as agents of a larger, destructive force, often guided by an unconscious or conscious desire to maintain the status quo of spiritual darkness. Why target divine principle students? The motivations behind the spiritual attack are deeply rooted in the objectives of the spiritual world of evil. Preventing enlightenment. The core aim is to prevent individuals from understanding and internalizing the divine principle, thereby keeping them in ignorance about God's plan and their true identity. Undermining faith and zeal. By making study difficult and frustrating, these spirits seek to dampen enthusiasm, instill doubt, and ultimately lead to spiritual apathy and disengagement. Blocking spiritual growth. If one cannot absorb the truth, one cannot grow. This stymies personal transformation and the development of a strong, principled character. Maintaining control. The spiritual world of evil thrives on human weakness, disunity, and intellectual blindness. By inducing lethargy, they maintain a measure of control over the individual's spiritual state. Disrupting providence. Every individual who truly understands and lives the divine principle becomes a force for good, a participant in restoring God's ideal. Hindering this process is a direct blow against God's providence. The influence of sleepy spirits is thus a strategic assault on the very mechanism of spiritual awakening and restoration inherent in the divine principle. Manifestations and experiential realities. The influence of sleepy spirits manifests in a variety of ways, ranging from the overtly physical to the subtly cognitive and emotional. Recognizing these patterns is the first step towards overcoming them. The immediate lull during study sessions. This is the most common and recognizable manifestation. Sudden, overwhelming drowsiness. Even after a full night's sleep, a student may find themselves struggling to keep their eyes open within minutes of a lecture or study session beginning. This is particularly pronounced during crucial parts of the explanation or when a profound truth is being revealed. Mental fog and lack of clarity. The mind feels heavy, concepts become blurred, and it becomes nearly impossible to connect ideas or retain information. It feels as if a thick spiritual veil has descended over one's intellect. Distractions and wandering thoughts. Even if one manages to stay awake, thoughts may incessantly drift to mundane matters, trivial concerns, or simply a blank state, preventing true engagement with the material, physical discomfort. Accompanying the drowsiness may be a heavy sensation in the head, strained eyes, or even a subtle feeling of pressure or malaise, distinct from ordinary physical discomfort. hyper-focused on minor irritations. Suddenly, the room is too hot or too cold, a sound is loud, or the chair is uncomfortable, serving as further distractions from the study. Immediate alertness upon disengagement. Often, the moment the lecture ends or the book is closed, the drowsiness lifts almost instantaneously, leaving the individual surprisingly alert, further suggesting a spiritual rather than purely physical cause. General spiritual lethargy. The influence is not limited to formal study. It can bleed into broader spiritual life. Procrastination in spiritual practice. A constant feeling of "I'll do it later" regarding prayer, meditation, spiritual reading, or reflection. Difficulty in prayer. The mind wanders during prayer, it feels dry and uninspired, or one simply falls asleep in mid-prayer. Loss of spiritual zeal. The initial fire and passion for God's providence and the divine principle begins to wane, replaced by apathy, indifference, or even cynicism. Feeling drained without cause. A persistent sense of fatigue and low energy, even when physical rest and nutrition are adequate. Difficulty in witnessing or sharing. A lack of motivation or confidence to share the divine principle with others, despite knowing its value. Impact on relationships. Irritability, withdrawal, or a general lack of enthusiasm for community activities, contributing to isolation. Testimonies and anecdotes. Illustrative examples. To underscore the reality of this phenomenon, consider these hypothetical yet representative experiences shared by students. I remember one intense principal lecture. I had slept well, eaten well, and was genuinely excited. But the moment the lecturer started explaining the meaning of the Messiah, a wave of intense drowsiness just hit me. My head felt like lead. I fought it, pinching myself, even standing up, but it was relentless. The second the lecture ended, I was wide awake, almost buzzing with frustration. For weeks, I couldn't get through a single chapter of the divine principle. I'd sit down, motivated, and then my mind would just go blank, or I'd fall asleep after a paragraph. It felt like I was literally battling an invisible force that was trying to seal my eyes and mind shut. My spiritual life felt like it was in quicksand. I knew I needed to pray, needed to study, but every time I tried, this profound apathy would just wash over me. It wasn't that I didn't believe. It was like some part of me just couldn't engage, felt too heavy. These experiences are not isolated incidents but a recurring theme among many who embark on the profound journey of studying the divine principle. Part 4. Theological and spiritual perspectives. A divine principle lens. Understanding the phenomenon of sleepy spirits requires grounding it in the comprehensive worldview of the divine principle. It helps us interpret these experiences not as random occurrences but as strategic moves within a larger cosmic drama. The divine principle teaches that the spiritual world and the physical world are two aspects of a single reality, constantly influencing each other. Our thoughts, emotions, and actions in the physical world create corresponding conditions in the spiritual world, and vice versa. Good versus evil spirits. The spiritual world comprises both good spirits, such as angels, and good ancestor spirits, who work to help humanity fulfill God's purpose, and evil spirits, fallen angels, evil ancestor spirits, who work to hinder it. Spiritual senses. Humans possess spiritual senses that can perceive the spiritual world, though these are often dulled by our fallen state. As one purifies oneself and grows spiritually, these senses can awaken. Atmosphere and influence. Just as physical environments have atmospheres, so do spiritual ones. A room where truth is being taught or pure devotion is offered radiates positive spiritual energy, whereas places of discord or negativity can attract lower spiritual influences. Sleepy spirits capitalize on this interactivity, manipulating the spiritual atmosphere around an individual or group. The entire course of human history, from the fall to the present day, is viewed as God's providence of restoration, a battle to reclaim humanity and creation from the dominion of Satan. This battle is fought on multiple fronts. Satan's strategy of doubt and ignorance. Satan's primary weapon is not always overt evil, but rather the subtle propagation of doubt, ignorance, and spiritual apathy. If individuals remain unaware of God's truth, they remain bound to the fallen ways. Truth as a weapon. The divine principle is precisely the truth that exposes Satan's lies and liberates humanity. Therefore, hindering its acceptance and understanding is a critical objective for the spiritual world of evil. Indemnity and overcoming. The principle of indemnity teaches that overcoming obstacles, especially those placed by the spiritual world of evil, builds spiritual strength and character. Therefore, confronting sleepy spirits is not merely defensive. It is an active contribution to one's own spiritual growth. The role of the Messiah and true parents. A crucial aspect of the divine principle is the concept of the Messiah, true parents, as the spiritual center and liberator for fallen humanity. They come to fulfill God's ideal and establish the kingdom of heaven on earth. Spiritual authority. True parents, having overcome Satan, possess immense spiritual authority to repel evil and connect individuals to God's original lineage. Source of true love. Their love, manifested through their life and teachings, is the most powerful force for dissolving spiritual darkness and activating dormant goodness. Guidance and protection. By aligning with true parents and their teachings, individuals receive spiritual protection and guidance that makes them less susceptible to negative influences. Invoking their name or understanding their position can be a powerful counter-strategy against sleepy spirits. From a divine principle perspective, sleepy spirits are not merely an inconvenience, but a tangible manifestation of the ongoing spiritual warfare, revealing the profound importance of the truth being taught and the necessity of conscious, active spiritual engagement. Part 5. The psychological and physical dimensions. Differentiating and interacting. While the focus of this article is on the spiritual aspect, it is crucial to maintain a balanced perspective and acknowledge that not every instance of drowsiness or lack of focus is solely due to sleepy spirits. There is a complex interplay between the spiritual, psychological, and physical dimensions of human experience, ruling out physical and psychological factors. Before attributing lethargy to spiritual influence, it is essential to consider and rule out more mundane explanations. Lack of sleep. Insufficient or poor quality sleep is the most obvious cause of drowsiness. Diet and nutrition. Heavy meals, excessive sugar, dehydration, or nutritional deficiencies can all lead to fatigue and mental sluggishness. Medical conditions. Underlying health issues like anemia, thyroid problems, chronic fatigue syndrome, sleep apnea, or other illnesses can manifest as persistent tiredness. Environmental factors. Poor ventilation, excessive heat, uncomfortable seating, or monotonous speaking styles can naturally induce sleepiness. Emotional stress and burnout. Prolonged stress, anxiety, or emotional exhaustion can deplete mental and physical energy, making concentration difficult. Mental health conditions. Depression, for example, can manifest as profound fatigue, apathy, and difficulty concentrating. Genuine intellectual struggle/boredom. Sometimes the material is genuinely difficult, or the presentation is genuinely unengaging, leading to cognitive overload or disinterest, which can feel like mental fatigue. It is wise to first address these factors. Ensure adequate rest, a healthy diet, hydration, a comfortable study environment, and manage stress. If, even after these conditions are optimized, the peculiar, sudden, and context-specific drowsiness persists, then spiritual influence becomes a more compelling explanation. 5.2. The interplay, spiritual influences and human vulnerabilities. The relationship between the spiritual and the physical and psychological is not always one way. Spiritual vulnerability through physical weakness. A physically exhausted or mentally stressed individual becomes more susceptible to spiritual influence. When our physical and mental defenses are down, the door is more easily opened for negative spiritual input. Spiritual influence manifesting physically. Sleepy spirits might induce physical symptoms like heavy eyelids, a cloudy head, or general body fatigue as a direct means to achieve their goal of preventing study. Psychological preparedness and spiritual strength. Conversely, a positive mindset, a strong resolve, and a belief in one's ability to overcome challenges can create a robust, spiritual immune system that makes one less susceptible to these influences. Therefore, an integrated approach is necessary. While focusing on spiritual countermeasures, one must not neglect physical self-care and mental well-being. A holistic practitioner of the divine principle understands that a healthy body and mind are essential vessels for a strong spirit. Part 6. Strategies for Awakening and Overcoming Practical Spiritual Warfare. Recognizing the phenomenon is only the first step. The truly empowering aspect lies in actively resisting and overcoming the influence of sleepy spirits. This requires a multi-pronged approach, integrating spiritual, physical, and psychological practices. 6.1 Acknowledgement and Intentionality. Conscious awareness. The most vital first step is to acknowledge the reality of sleepy spirits. Refuse to dismiss the experience as mere fatigue. Hiding from the problem empowers it. Setting clear intentions. Before every study session or lecture, consciously set a clear intention. I dedicate this time to studying God's truth. I invite good spiritual forces to assist me and repel any negative influences. My mind will be clear, my heart open, and my spirit alert. This act of intentionality creates a spiritual boundary. 6.2 Prayer and Invocation. Direct spiritual countermeasures. Prayer is a powerful tool against negative spiritual influences. Specific repelling prayer. Before study. In the name of the Heavenly Parent and True Parents, I bind and repel any sleepy spirits, spirits of lethargy, or spirits of confusion that try to interfere with my study of the divine principle. I command them to depart from this place and from my mind and spirit. I declare this space holy and dedicated to God's truth. During onset, if drowsiness hits, stop, take a deep breath, and silently or audibly repeat a similar prayer. Invocation of good spirits. Actively invite good spirits, heavenly hosts, spiritual guides, good ancestors, to assist in understanding and retaining the material. Heavenly Parent, True Parents, please send good spiritual guides to help me open my mind and heart to your truth. Prayer of gratitude and dedication. Express gratitude for the opportunity to learn the principle and dedicate the study for God's glory and the establishment of the kingdom of heaven. This elevates the spiritual atmosphere. Pledge and promise. Make a conscious pledge to God to understand and live the principle, as spirits respond to sincerity and determination. Proclamation of truth and words of power. Speaking truth aloud has spiritual power. Reading aloud. Read passages of the divine principle aloud, especially those that feel particularly profound or challenging. The spoken word resonates spiritually. Affirmations. Develop and repeat affirmations that counter the influence. My mind is clear and alert. I am open to God's truth. I am filled with spiritual energy. Invoking true parents' names. The names of true parents carry spiritual authority. When feeling drowsy, one can silently or audibly invoke, "True parents, please help me awaken," or "True parents, repel these sleepy spirits." Singing holy songs, if appropriate, Singing a sacred song before or during a break from study can dramatically shift the spiritual atmosphere and uplift the spirit. Physical practices. Engaging the body to awaken the spirit. The physical body is a temple of the spirit, and engaging it consciously can combat spiritual lethargy. Change of posture. If sitting, stand up. If standing, walk around. Physical movement disperses stagnant energy. Deep breathing and stretching. Deep, conscious breaths oxygenate the brain and bring one back into the present moment. Light stretching can relieve tension. Splashing water. Splashing cold water on the face or wrists is a quick, physical shock that can temporarily break the spell of drowsiness. Sensory stimulation. Step outside for fresh air, drink a glass of water, or even have a light, healthy snack. Optimize environment. Ensure adequate ventilation, good lighting, and a comfortable but not too comfortable study space. Avoid dark, stuffy rooms. Regular exercise and sleep hygiene. Prioritizing physical health significantly reduces vulnerability. Ensure consistent, adequate sleep and regular physical activity. Engaging the intellect and heart. Active absorption. A passive approach to study makes one more susceptible. Active listening and reading. Don't just absorb, actively question, summarize, relate the material to your own life. Physically writing notes keeps the mind engaged and helps organize complex information. Discussion and teaching. Explaining concepts to others or discussing them in a study group forces deeper understanding and retention. Cultivating a learner's heart. Approach the divine principle with humility, eagerness, and a genuine desire to know God's truth. A heart filled with gratitude and earnestness is a powerful shield. Connecting to purpose. Remind yourself why you are studying the divine principle for God, for humanity, for your own spiritual growth. This higher purpose can reignite motivation. Breaking down study sessions. Instead of long, uninterrupted blocks, break study into shorter, focused sessions with brief breaks in between. Spiritual cleansing and offering conditions. Acts of sincere devotion and repentance purify the spiritual atmosphere. Repentance. Acknowledging and repenting for past mistakes or unprincipled actions can cleanse one's spiritual environment and reduce vulnerability. Offering devotion. Regularly offering sincere prayers, tithing, or performing acts of service conditions can build a spiritual foundation that repels negative forces. Purity of heart. Striving for a pure heart, free from resentment, anger, and self-centered desires, create inner sanctuary that is difficult for negative spirits to penetrate. Incense/holy water. In some traditions, using consecrated elements like incense or holy water can symbolically cleanse a space, aligning with the idea of creating a sacred study environment. Community support and accountability. Individual spiritual warfare is strengthened by collective power. Study groups. Studying with others provides external accountability, allows for discussion, and creates a collective spiritual field that is more resistant to negative influence. Sharing experiences. Openly discussing struggles with sleepy spirits with trusted spiritual friends or leaders can provide validation, encouragement, and shared strategies. Collective prayer. When a group prays together for clarity and protection, the spiritual power is magnified. Mentorship. Seeking guidance from spiritual elders or mentors who have overcome similar challenges can provide invaluable wisdom and spiritual strength. The principle of indemnity and perseverance. Viewing these challenges through the lens of indemnity transforms them from frustrations into opportunities. Building spiritual muscle. Every time one successfully resists a sleepy spirit and pushes through to engage with the principle, one builds spiritual strength and resilience. It is a condition of indemnity, paying for past ignorance and building the foundation for future blessings. God's support. God and the good spiritual world support those who earnestly strive to understand and live His truth. Perseverance demonstrates sincerity and draws divine assistance. Ultimate victory. Remember that the forces of good ultimately triumph. This struggle is temporary, and every victory contributes to the larger restoration of God's ideal. Part 7. Beyond the individual, community and cosmic perspective. The struggle against sleepy spirits is not an isolated, individual battle. It is part of a larger cosmic drama, and the collective efforts of a community dedicated to the divine principle play a crucial role. The church/movement as a spiritual hub. The Unification Church, as the embodiment of the divine principle in the external world, is intended to be a spiritual sanctuary and a beacon of truth. Collective spiritual atmosphere. A community united in heart and purpose creates a strong spiritual atmosphere that naturally repels negative influences, shared indemnity and blessings. The collective conditions offered by the community contribute to a stronger spiritual foundation for all its members. Centers of light. Local centers, churches, and meeting places where the divine principle is regularly taught and devotion offered become centers of light that can dissipate spiritual darkness.